Hello, dear viewers. Namaskar. Welcome to Moksha Media. You are with Moksha Hiremat. On the other day, I told you something about the classification of a language. There are four types of classification. I have told you something about two out of four classifications of language. Those told classifications are geographical classification and racial classification. On the other day, I clarified it to you regarding these two classifications. In geographical classification, I gave you the example of African and American languages, and in the racial classification, I gave you the examples of Aryan, Dravidian, Tyrrhenian and Scythian languages. Today, I would like to tell you something about the typological classification. The typological classification is also called as structural classification. This structural classification or typological classification has two parts. They are external and internal. The words used in a language, the body organs of the persons using that language are considered as external parts. Grammatical aspect of that language and internal structure of a body organs are considered as internal parts of a body. Schlegel and Segal and Fleischer used this classification to a great extent. They used this structural classification or typological classification. They again categorized this classification into 5 categories. They are isolating language category, that is a Chinese language, agglutinative language category, that is a Turkish language, inflectional language category, example Indo-European languages such as Sanskrit and English, and Semitic languages such as Arabic. And the fourth one is polysynthetic language category, that is North American languages. 5. Incorporating language category, example Basque language. So, by categorizing the typological classification into 5, they try to understand the nature of a particular language. They try to analyze the structure of a language. Of course, yes, in the beginning, this structural language was very popular. So many persons used this structural language in analyzing the parts of a language and other things. As the time goes on and on, linguists come to know the limitation of this structural classification. They come to know the limitation of typological classification. Because what is inflectional in a language may not be same regarding other languages. For example, Indo-European languages. For example, English is an inflectional language. Sanskrit is also an Indo-European language. That Sanskrit is belonging to Indo-European classification, Indo-European categories, but not Dravidian categories. Anyhow, but they don't match to each other. That is, inflectional language and agglutinative languages category are not matchable. That is, agglutinative language such as Turkish is not matchable with isolating languages, that is, Chinese languages. So, one point is there in one category, but another point is not there in other category, another language. That is why they feel it very difficult to come to a conclusion of a particular language in a particular context. And of course, what is polysynthetic language category, that is not American languages, may not have the characteristics of Basque language. So, these categories have their own limitations. Linguists understood these limitations. But anyhow, they tried their best to understand the nature, the workable condition, the communication, the grammatical aspect of those languages in their structural classification. Of course, there are some languages. Those languages would not come in the structural languages. They have their own identity. Of course, there are languages such as Urdu. Urdu is an Indian language. It is an hybridization of Sanskrit and Hindi and of course some South Indian languages at the time of Akbar. But so many of us think that it is not an Indian language. It has the characteristics of Arabic language, Sanskrit language, and of course English language to a little extent and other languages. It is one of the constitutional languages in India. That is different matter. But anyhow, regarding these things, one cannot come to conclusion in a proper way. That is my point. So here, the structural analysis of a language fails to an extent. That is why linguists are in confusion. Which classification should be applied in such a case? And which are those characteristics we have to take into account in those accounts, in those things? These things push the linguists into dilemmas. That is why they were in confusion and they tried their best to understand language in another classification. But anyhow, I will tell you of those classifications in the next episode. So, here my point is, what is there in one language may not be there in another language. And the characters of those languages are different. What is there in Aryan language, Indo-Aryan language, may not be there in Dravidian language. But influence of it can be seen, can be felt. The influence of Dravidian language on Aryan languages and on English, the influence of Aryan languages and English languages such as Sanskrit and English can be seen in Dravidian language. Influence is different, but the structure of those languages are entirely different. So, the structure of them is very important. In Indo-European languages, that is Indo-Aryan languages, we take into account the subject, the verb, and the object. That is, we say SVO. That is, word order should be in the subject, verb, and object. But in Dravidian languages, it is otherwise. The word order in Dravidian language is a subject, object, and verb. Verb comes at the end of a sentence in Dravidian languages, whereas verb comes in the middle of a subject and object in English language and Sanskrit language. Of course, these classification, these differences can be seen in the grammar of Aryan languages and the Dravidian languages. But of course, as far as race is concerned, nowadays we are going to say there were no race as Aryan, there were no race as Dravidian. That is another point. Here I don't want to get into the subject of that races, because as the time goes on, the races are mingled together. So somewhere at the development of a period, somewhere in the history of advancement, some changes took place. Once upon a time we don't have these digital medias, but now digital media is part and parcel of your life. Once upon a time no one heard the computers. Once upon a time no one could transact the business sitting in the corner of a room and clicking the button and getting in a seconds what they want. These are the new developments. Once upon a time the biological development takes the importance, and another time the physiological advancement takes time, and other time the other developments can be seen. We can see in the species of Darwin, the theory of evolution. We can see in the theory of relativity invented by Einstein. We see it in the theory of Newton. We see in the theory of so many linguists. Because as the time goes on and on, as the advancement goes on and on, it is also applied to other fields of the human activity. That is what here, whatever is invented, whatever is developed, whatever is advanced, gradually is adapted into the lives of a people, into the life of a society. When it grips the society, automatically new changes takes place, or new changes take place. That is what we see in religions. That is what we see in political theories. That is what we see in the field of philosophy and mathematics. That is what we see in the field of logic, and etc. etc. Like this, so many examples can be given. In the same way, there are so many changes in the development and advancement of a language. Language goes back in the history, and the research should be done. When we do research, we cannot say this is the final. It is going towards a finalization, but not final itself. It is going to particularization in a material and an abstract way. But if it is not itself an abstract one. So in this way, the changes go on and on in the society. So one day or other day, when they grip the mind and heart of the people, they become part and parcel of the people, they become part and parcel of the society. So, like that it goes on and on. Once upon a time, Bengaluru was a village, but now you cannot say it has become a metro. Once upon a time, Bengaluru was called as a sleepy town, but now it cannot be said nowadays. You cannot call it a garden city. Now we have to say the garbage city. These are the things, these are the changes, because of the unscientific application of the scientific things. That is what we do mistakes. Inventions are alright. When those scientific inventions are applied to society unscientifically, automatically garden city becomes a garbage city. See, fast and civilized and cultural city becomes a slum city, etc., etc. If you go to particular area of Bengaluru or Bombay, you will be wondered how the people live there. Because as a human being, one cannot live in those areas. But people live due to inevitability. They don't want to go to villages because the village economy is very simple economy. They don't want to go to other economies also due to so many things, so many factors. Here, in a city like Bengaluru, anyone can live. But it can be said same thing to other things, to other areas. That's why people get together, that's why people are grouped together, they are amassed together, and as the accumulation goes on and on, they don't have the civilized facilities. Then automatically it leads to garbage city, it leads to slum area. That is another development. Anyhow, all these things, all these words regarding these things would be accumulated in the language. Often and often I say, Bengaluru was not there in Kannada language or in English language. Now Bengaluru is the part and parcel of an English language, is the part and parcel of a Kannada language. It can be found in the dictionaries of Kannada and English. Once upon a time, living relationship were not there. But now in cities like Bangalore, so many youths are yielding to that living relationship. To what extent they shape their life, I don't know. But when I see such youngsters, automatically their life is spoiled. That is sure. That is the concrete. But they yield to their emotions, passions and fashions also. And due to those passions and due to those emotions, they yield to living together relationship, and by that they create a degenerated culture. It may be the influence of Western culture or some other culture, but anyhow, it is not a good influence. When we adopt a particular thing, we should take into account the goodness or badness of that culture. If it is good, we should adapt it to our life. But when it is good, it is not good, why should we adapt it? But anyhow, when the cities go on and on developing in this way, automatically they create their own language. Automatically a different type of language is developed. Once upon a time, the Bengaluru dialect, Kannada dialect was not there. But now we say Bengaluru dialect because of these developments, because of these things. So, linguists try to study all these things in the typological classification, that is, the structural classification, but this structural classification has its own limitations. That is why linguists see other classification and they would like to analyze a language and culture of language, the civilization of that language in a different way, and how it affects and affects, how it goes on and on living amidst the people. They show it to the world, they record it in their findings. That is what we have to concentrate on it. Anyhow, it can be seen in the next episode. Subscribe and share it, and see you in the next episode. Thank you. Namaskar.